Welcome to TV on TV. I'm State Representative Tommy Vitolo. You're watching Brookline Interactive Group. Today is Thursday, February 8th, and we have a great show for you today. Our guest interview is with Diana McClure. She's with the Brookline League of Women Voters, and she serves as the chair of the steering committee. And Diana and I, in an interview earlier this week, discussed the Brookline League of Women Voters, what they've been up to, what they're doing now, what they're doing in the near future. And it's a great time to talk with the League of Women Voters because there are 4 elections in Massachusetts, at least in Brookline, in 2024. We have the presidential primary, our local elections, the state primary, and then our state elections. And so I hope that you will stay tuned for that interview. But first, we'll kick it off with the news, and our news begins with some election news. United States President Joe Biden won the South Carolina Democratic primary with 96% of the vote over this past weekend. Yesterday in Nevada, Nikki Haley led all Republican primary participants with 33%, placing well behind none of the above with 60%. Donald Trump, not on the primary ballot, easily won the Nevada Republican caucuses and their corresponding delegates. Are you as confused as I am? The D.C. Court of Appeals has ruled that former President Trump is not immune from prosecution for crimes he's alleged to have committed while president. The immigration deal put together by a bipartisan group of senators has thus far failed to gain adequate support to overcome a filibuster. Whereas Senate Republicans are thus far successful in blocking immigration reform this week, House Republicans failed in their impeachment vote yesterday, 216 to 214. Had the GOP been successful, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas would have been the second ever impeached cabinet official. The Massachusetts Budget and Policy Center found that immigrants who settle and find work in Massachusetts provide a direct economic benefit to the region as measured by value of work produced and local spending power. The World Cup will stage 7 matches in Foxborough in June and July 2026 in the stadium formerly known as Gillette. Although FIFA apparently has the power to rename the stadium Boston Stadium, only the state legislature has the power to rename the town of Foxborough. Massachusetts will receive $8 million from a national settlement with Publicis Health, a marketing company that worked for Purdue Pharma. The settlement resolves litigation that alleged Publicis was paid to market addictive medication. Brookline and the MBTA have finalized an agreement to try out a bus-only lane for a year on Route 9 near Brookline Village. This lane will help the 60, 65, and 66 buses stay on schedule. Brookline Public Schools will redesign the 9th grade curriculum next year. It intends to reimagine its English, physics, and math courses, including de-leveling 9th grade English. A police officer and a private citizen crashed their automobiles on Monday morning. Both went to a local hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. Folks, that's the news. I hope that you will stay tuned when we go to the flip side for an interview earlier this week with Chair of the League of Women Voters Steering Committee, Diana McClure. Stay tuned. And as I said, today's guest on TV is Diana McClure. She's got a very important title. She is the chair of the steering committee of the Brookline League of Women Voters. Diana, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Diana, we always start with this question, and it's no different for you than for anybody else on this program. What have you been doing your whole life? How did we get to this point together?
Well, I've had a long life, and I've been retired since 2011. I have lived in Brookline for a little over 50 years. And as soon as I moved there and had our first child, I joined the League of Women Voters. And the reason why was my mother had belonged to the League in Southern California, where we grew up. And then I was very busy for a number of years. But the first thing I did when I retired was to join the League of Women Voters. So I've been active since 2012.
Now, the League of Women Voters, as you noted, has a long history,
Mhm.
and clearly it has evolved over the years. And so maybe you can help viewers understand kind of what it is to be a League of Women Voters chapter in 2024.
Mhm. Well, the league has been around since 1920. Right, and I think that the Brookline League may have been the second local league in the United States after the 19th Amendment giving women the vote was passed. So we have a long history in Brookline. The league has been active for decades and decades. I think what has evolved, even through the process of my life, was that as women uh, started entering the workforce in a lot greater numbers in the 70s and 80s, there was not as much time available for people to volunteer. And so the league has, because our league in Brookline was huge numbers, but now it's a smaller group of active people, a lot of whom are retired, but feel very civically engaged, because the whole purpose of the League of Women Voters is voter education and civic engagement. And so a lot of us have had a long history of either doing that or we're very interested in that. And so we do target, and we could talk about this some very specific forums and types of meetings that we hold. We're always nonpartisan, so we don't get involved in politics or support particular candidates, but we do address many issues of interest to the general public. And I can explain how we've done that some this fall as we move along in this conversation.
Now, I want to dig in just a little bit. The first thing I noticed is you said people or persons. You didn't say women. So is there something there that I maybe is
Yeah, there
relatively
is
new?
something there. Uh, if the league is open to men too, and we actually do have quite a few men who are members of the league. I don't think the name is ever going to change, partly based on its history, and it's a little complicated. But yes, very, very much open and welcoming everybody.
Another thing you said is that the league is nonpartisan, which is certainly, matches my experience, right? The league isn't endorsing candidates or doing that. But the league does, in fact, take positions on some legislation that is not strictly sort of election laws kind of legislation. And I know that because I hear from the
Mhm.
Brookline League of Women Voters and members in favor of bills that, most often I happen to co-sponsor and think are perfectly good bills, not always. So tell us a little bit about that part of the League of Women Voters, something that
Yes, the,
people don't
yeah,
really
the,
know is part of your way of being.
right. Right. The league is structured where the foundation is all the local leagues like Brookline, Newton, Needham, all kinds of communities. But every state has a state League of Women Voters, and then there's United States League of Women Voters. And there's a whole process of studying issues and taking positions, which generally starts at the local level on topics of interest, from the climate to affordable housing to transportation to quality education, all different kinds of issues. And so when you're talking about the state league, there are many positions, general positions with a lot of detail, but the studies might have been done 1, 2, 3 decades ago, but the principles are there. So the state league decides in your 2-year legislative sessions in Massachusetts which number of bills that they would like to concentrate on based on the positions that the league has. And then they can testify before committees and be very active in their participation at the state level.
And this is, of course, in addition to advocating for bills about voting and ballot access and
Yes. Yeah.
and counting the ballots correctly and all of these
Yeah.
things that are critical to
Yeah.
free and fair
Yeah.
elections. I know you at the league at the local level also have a substantial amount of local programming. Uh, Tell us about some of the more recent sessions you've had, learning sessions or
Mhm.
forums, I don't know the word you use to describe them,
Mhm.
but I
Mhm.
do get the advertisements. So tell us about
Yes.
some of the things you've done recently, the
Yes,
topics,
yes,
the kinds of guests, that sort of
yeah.
thing.
We do work in partnership with some other town organizations, and the most recent one that we did was about a week ago, and it was the Town Meeting Members Association, in collaboration with us, put on a forum on how to write a warrant article, since the town elections and town meeting are coming up, and uh, the the process right now, if people want to submit a warrant article, they have to be doing it right now and collecting signatures. So the league has a very good working relationship with the Brookline Interactive Group. We are a nonprofit member of BIG. So we were able to hold this forum by Zoom and live televised on the BIG channels, as well as live streamed. And they always record these sessions so that they are available so people can come and review them later, or people who could not attend the actual meeting can view them and listen to them. So that was the latest one. And then the one before that, which is just a few weeks ago, was on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we called it Turning Words into Effective Action. Um, an online panel around DEI initiatives. But what we did, which we've had excellent feedback on, is to have a discussion amongst a very diverse panel of people from different racial, ethnic, economic level backgrounds in Brookline around what it is that encourages them not only to join and participate in forms of town government, but also different committees and organizations in town. It's not just the topic. A lot of what they talked about was how welcome they feel and whether they are really listened to. What do they have to contribute? And the reason why there are two reasons why the league felt this was very important. One is, from the national, state, and local level, we all have as our main mission incorporating, or to use the lens of equity and inclusion in everything that we do. So we've got to put our practice where our mouth is. And in meeting with the people from the Brookline Foundation, Community Foundation, with the report that they just, Understanding Brookline, that they put out, 30% of the population of Brookline does not identify as white. 17, about almost 18%, this is all based on the 2020 census, are of Asian background. There are about 30%, I think it is, of households of anybody over 5 years old, of households, English is not their primary language at home. So if you think in just a practical manner about what all of us want to do in Brookline, is to get the entire community engaged, it means that we have to be reaching out, figuring out how to be a lot more inclusive than those who are traditionally and typically involved. And so I would really suggest that people go to the big website and find that forum and listen to it, because we've had a lot of good feedback, and it gives a lot of organizations ideas how to reach out to a lot more people. And that's really what the league is all about, is civic engagement and voter education.
Now, while not our next election, we do have a town election coming up, and that is on Tuesday, May 6th. The league certainly doesn't endorse candidates, but is clearly interested in democracy and voting. And so what will the Brookline League do, or maybe what do you have planned, maybe not finalized yet, around this upcoming May election?
Right. Well, the league traditionally for decades has published a print voter's guide with the league develops a question or two that they present to all of the candidates for townwide offices, as well as their individualized questions for the particular office, and then for all town meeting members. And that is published in a print version of the voter's guide. Starting last year, we've used the framework that the National League has. It's called Vote 411, and it's an online tool which a lot of people found very useful. So we'll have both of them available this spring. So we'll be getting started on that. We typically hold some kind of candidates forum, as well as we always hold some warrant article forums around town meeting. We definitely do have a forum for the select board candidates planned in cooperation with Brookline Can on April 17th at the Senior Center from 4 to 6 p.m. And it will be live broadcast by Big and recorded so people can watch it afterwards. So those are a few examples of what we do.
Well, and this year, of course, every year for townwide offices, what's competitive, what's exciting can vary. This year, so far, it looks like we will have competitive races for select board, school committee, and
Mhm.
housing authority.
Mhm.
And so there may be opportunities for more than one forum or
Mhm.
longer forum, depending
Yeah.
on what makes sense for the
Right.
room and for everything else. And I think, it's like everything else. The top line is select board, and that tends to draw the most attention.
Mhm.
But these other townwide offices also, of course, are tremendously important. And the league
Absolutely.
plays a really important role in helping voters know sort of what the scope and the responsibilities are
Mhm.
of these other elected offices so that they
Mhm.
can figure out which candidate they think will best represent
Right.
the direction they want the town to
Right.
go.
Right. And I think, so I have described the kinds of things that we do, but also it's important for people to understand what our town government is, how it operates. And another major initiative that we have in collaboration with the Brookline Neighborhood Alliance is to be putting on some forums on forms of government, because there has been forms of town government, because there has been quite a bit of discussion in town where some people, or a substantial number of people, are at least thinking about maybe we need a different form of government. Is our representative town meeting form of government working? Is it adequate? And in the fall, we worked with the Brookline Neighborhood Alliance and put on a forum of that name about forms of government. And we had a couple of speakers from the UMass Collins Center describing various forms of government in order to lay the framework out. And we will be planning another one that we hope to do in March with the Brookline Neighborhood Alliance, and it will likely be around what's working and what isn't working in Brookline. So I think that that's another role that the league is very well positioned to provide this public education for people who aren't super engaged already in town, to just understand how the town government works, the interrelationship of the various bodies of government, and then ultimately, why do we love this form of government? I mean, ultimately, everybody might decide this is just really great and keep it, but there is a process of thinking about it.
Well, and I would just add, even people who are very involved with local government, few of them could detail the differences, for example,
Mhm.
between a town administrator and a town manager. Right?
Absolutely.
Like, so
Yeah.
even folks who are active in this every day, every
Mhm.
week, getting into the technical details of the
Mhm.
different forms of town government and the different forms of city government and what the elected positions are, what the staff positions are, and how things come together,
Mhm.
I think is super helpful. And I'll give you a specific example. Many people in towns assume that city elections are held in November on even numbered years, along with US Senate and president and US House and governor and so forth. In
Mhm.
fact, nearly every city holds their elections in September and November of odd numbered years, where there
Mhm.
still isn't a connection with the federal elections. And
Mhm.
that's sort of the thing where people think they know what they
Mhm.
want. And then when you say, well, actually, this is how the cities are doing it, and that's not what you're imagining either. Uh,
Mhm.
there's so much to learn because Massachusetts has 351 unique local governments,
Mhm.
um, and working through that
Yeah.
is,
Yeah,
is
Tommy, can I
quite
say one thing that we do also traditionally through the years, we have what we have called Friday conversations that even pre-COVID, we held at 10 in the morning on Fridays. And then in COVID, we went by Zoom. And one of the benefits of Zoom is that you can record whatever you're doing. And so those Friday conversations were always posted on the big website. And I hope that we will be able to get that link out at the end of this interview today. so that people can go find these. Because, for instance, you were talking about the town administrator. Maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we had a Friday conversation where the town administrator explained the whole process. And then for a few years, the league had what we call an engaged citizen corner in the on the opinion page or the Brookline tab. And bi-weekly, we published articles, and they often were writing up what the Friday conversations were about. So we will be doing some of those. And as you said earlier, there's a competitive school committee race and the Brookline Housing Authority and topics of real interest. We will also hold those kinds of forums, and they will be recorded so that people can look at them at their convenience within their time frame of availability.
And so we've talked actually a lot about technology. We've got, this website for candidates. We've got the Zoom forums and recording using Brookline Interactive Television. Do you get together in person anymore?
Well, it's hard. We had hoped this fall. I mean, we wanted to have an opening meeting in person. Sure enough, not only did speakers get sick, it's really just not practical now. Personally, I can't wait till we can get back into more in-person meetings. A couple of the ones that we did with the Brookline Neighbor Alliance, as well as the one that was also with the Town Meeting Members Association on the MBTA Communities Act warrant articles that were before town meeting in November, those were held in person in town hall and big live stream them. People could join by Zoom, and they had them recorded so that people could watch them afterwards. So that was nice. We did have people in the room, but there's one of the advantages of these multimedia or different platforms and the recordings is that people have an opportunity in many different time frames to be able to watch what went on and to go back even, a week or two later to remind themselves.
You mentioned the MBTA Communities Act sort of warrant article review, and that was the article was big. It had significant impact. It drew a lot of attention. So it was sort of a premier warrant article. How often does the league do a dive on particular warrant articles coming up for the May or November town meeting? Is that a typical thing you all do?
Yes, during COVID, I think maybe even, excuse me, maybe before COVID, we did have some Zoom meetings on warrant articles that people really appreciated. I think the question still is, how do we reach a much broader voting public? Because there isn't a huge number of people who attend these. And at the end of the Turning Words into Effective Action, the DEI forum that we had a couple of weeks ago, there was one of those fast round questions with what's the final advice? Well, the question was actually, how can we get people who traditionally do not vote, get out to vote? And one of the speakers, Carlos Rios, who's a town meeting member from Precinct 5, basically said, keep it simple. Just explain things simply. And I think to get back to the form we did on the MBTA Communities Act, that was so complicated. But to be able to do a 1.5-hour session with excellent speakers and excellent PowerPoints, but they made it clear so that people who aren't going to delve into 800 pages that the town meeting members had to read, that they basically know what it's about. So yes, this is very much front and center on our agenda to do those kind of educational forums.
Well, and of course, it's challenging. The difference between politics and policy sometimes is a clever 2-sentence phrase or turn of phrase and 800 pages of legislation. And the 2 sentences gets everyone interested, and we sort of hash that out. But in fact, it's the 800 pages that becomes the law that is enforced or not. And so distilling something complex into something that is both easy to say and understand and is correct, it's not so easy.
No, it isn't. And I write a monthly column for the Brookline Beacon, the newsletter that comes out through Brookline Can and the Senior Center. And I'm only allowed 500 words. So talk about discipline to explain something. And I did one at that point in time on the MBTA Communities Act, but I always run these difficult complicated subject matter by the people that are the experts, to be sure, because I've made it much simpler and paraphrased it, but it's still got to be accurate and to the point. And I always get terrific edits from the experts on that. So I think that that's very useful. People need to have just a basic understanding.
So I'm sure people are watching this and thinking, geez, this League of Women Voters sounds awesome. I want to be more involved. How can my viewers get more involved with the Brookline League of Women Voters?
Well, we would love to hear from you. There's one way that you can contact us is through our email, which is league@lwvbrookline.org. And I'm sure that then I would be glad to call you or other members of our steering committee, who are Felina Silver and Shayna Pena. We're sort of the executive branch of the league, that we would be more than happy to return your call and talk with you. I seriously believe in one-on-one contact and having real conversations between two people, to understand what is it we're trying to do, what is it you are interested in, and how can this fit your time schedule and your interests. So we would love to hear from you. And we do need help as we're working on this voters guide. People have more digital experience. It would be really helpful. And this is time restricted, it just covers a certain period of time, then the job's done. So if that would help, and we can help with, you could help at voter registration tables, and event organization, because the more hands we have to organize events, the better.
Well, we just have a few minutes left. Any final thoughts? Any last minute things we didn't cover, things coming up? What should we be thinking about?
Well, what immediately pops in my mind is I think this is a very important year, 2024, for many reasons that we don't even need to really talk about. But also there are 4 elections that each registered voter has the opportunity to vote in Brookline, can vote, either by mail or early voting or at the polls. And it's, for instance, the first one that's coming up is the presidential primary, which is Tuesday, March 5th. And I don't have the dates in front of me, but we have the spring election for all of the town officials in May. And then we have the presidential, September presidential, no, that's the state.
That's the state primary, not presidential.
Oh, the state, sorry, yeah, I knew that was right. The state primary, and then the presidential election in November. So it's a very busy year. And if people are interested in getting involved in the league, I think we have a lot of opportunity this year, just because it's a big political year, to capture people's interest and get people engaged and be able to participate in and learn from the events that we put on. And we'd love to get feedback from anybody out there around the kinds of events you would like us to put on, or the information that you need. The more feedback we get, the better.
Give us that email address one more time.
Okay, it's league, LEAGUE, @lwvbrookline.org.
Diana McClure, Chair of the Steering Committee of the Brookline League of Women Voters. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
on TV here on Brookline Interactive Group and spending a little time with us.
Thank you very much, Tommy. Appreciate it.
We will certainly see you at the State House on Election Day and many days in between.
Okay. Thank you.